And now, since it's all machines doing all the work, 50% of the world's petroleum consumption is tied up in our food system, and it occupies 1 billion acres. There's also 40 million acres of lawn space that, grassland in front of people's cookie cutter ticky tack houses. They've got grass, 40 million acres of it. In that 40 million acres, with tree crops and perennial vegetables and small vegetable patches of high intensity annual agriculture, we could easily feed everybody in the United States and completely eliminate the need for an industrial food system and completely liberate 1 billion acres of land for restoration projects and polycultural orchards and forest gardens that center around native habitat and wildlife habitat and river health and stream health and all that sort of thing. And it would take no time. I mean, we saw it with COVID at the beginning of COVID, when all the factories shut down in like China and India and stuff. And the scientists were like, oh my God, we can't believe it. The rivers are clean. The air is clean. We thought this was going to take decades to achieve with active remediation project. No, if we just get the fuck out of the way, nature will take care of the rest. And if we actively tie into the remediation and identify these big problems and address them systematically and collectively, then we could clean up the world in no time. We don't have to worry about Florida going underwater, because in 2 to 3 years we could sequester all of the carbon since the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago. All the carbon that's been put into the atmosphere could be back in the soil in a matter of years. That's just increasing organic matter by like 1%, I think, in arable soil. That's not even to say anything of the steps that we can take towards reversing desertification and, actively planting out giant forests and stuff like that. Like, we could do so much. And really, the biggest enemy is just capitalism. Good old capitalism.
Damn. All right. On that note, welcome to another episode of Community Culture. I'm Julia.
And I'm Tree.
And that was Eric Joseph Lewis. We interviewed Jess Russell and Eric Joseph Lewis this week on the podcast. They were actually also on the Garden Communer Cult with us. They weren't featured at all because their presence was so educational and wholesome that it was really off-brand for the show. But they were awesome. They came and did a wild edible plant walk. It was National Naked Gardening Day, so that's the naked parade you see in the beginning of the trailer, shown in this scary way. We were doing this naked plant walk that was really beautiful. And yeah, they're both permaculturists that live in Maryland. They have a Plant Path Nursery, it's called. They do plant walks and permaculture design courses. And yeah, we get into some really awesome topics this week. I think one of the cool questions that we talk a lot about is, how to feed yourself off grid. Eric really focuses a lot on how to propagate easy to grow, calorie dense foods to really make, filling your whole diet with what's around you truly possible. And we also talk about how to practice permaculture even if you live in a city. So this episode is really for everybody. We hope you enjoy.
Enjoy.
What's up?
This is it. So did you get your nuts? Did you bring your nuts with you?
Oh yeah. I mean, I checked in with Jess before the podcast, and she's totally cool with us showing my nuts to the world. I mean, I know it's YouTube and all, but we're just gonna show these nuts.
Sweet, great. We could start our OnlyFans page from this. Perfect.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I want people to get excited about eating my nuts. So
pecans, hazelnut. What you got?
Chestnuts, pecans. Yeah, lots of good ones.
Amazing. Where are you right now? Are you using MD?
Yeah, we're in Maryland at Plant Path Nursery in Knoxville, Maryland. I do a lot of teaching from here, and we grow, I don't know, 20, 30,000 trees each year.
Woohoo!
So, yeah, it's
Is
good
that
stuff. A little permaculture nursery.
is that where you guys spend most of your year? Like you're pretty much living at Plant Path Nursery and then just visiting
Yeah,
other
we
farms and stuff?
usually, yeah, and then we take like a trip in the winter down to Florida usually, or like, somewhere tropical and warm. And then usually take a trip in the summer, either out to the mountains or up to Maine, somewhere cooler. Kind
That's
of
the
go where,
perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly, right? That's the perfect way to live. Like when I had a backpack, that's pretty much how I survived. I didn't have a sleeping bag, so I just always had to be somewhere warm where I could sleep outside with nothing. But like now in the US, I'm trying to do the same, but with having land that I can go to and still farm at instead of just, like bumming it. It's
Hmm.
beautiful. Yeah. We're trying to get a school bus right now so we can make it a lot easier for us and just go to Florida. But whenever.
Yeah,
And
we got,
you're doing a plant walk there in a couple of days.
yeah, I'm gonna do a plant walk pretty much for my birthday. We
Oh,
did that last year and I really enjoyed it. Like my favorite thing is getting people excited about plants and deepening the relationship between people and plants. So it seems like a great way to celebrate my life.
wow. And they're all donation based. That's beautiful, right? Or
Yeah,
mostly.
like 90%. Most of the plant walks are donation based. We charge for the permaculture design course, and next year I'm gonna do a foraging intensive that it'll still be donation based, but it'll just be more of like suggested donation, 25 to
Hmm.
$50 a day, but everything we're open.
Yeah,
That's
that's
really
really
good.
cool. And I bet this one on your birthday, you won't be naked, It's crazy.
No, no.
Be in our
That was your
birthday.
second time on the show, right? Doing it?
Yeah, that was the second naked plant walk that we've ever done. The first one was actually our first date. So,
Wow, that's the way to start.
yeah.
Cute. Yeah, it's crazy. They used that. It's sad that they didn't actually show that it was a plant walk. We thought, like, yeah, like if we're naked, that's a cooler way to show on TV, like how to make a plant walk more exciting and stuff. But instead, they just used it with scary music to make us look weird. But hey, here we go. Whatever, TV.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was bizarre. I was just preparing for this. I was like looking through your Instagrams, and I found like a post from Jess right after I guess you guys got back from Missouri, and it was just like so optimistic and like pure-hearted of like I really hope this like platform helps get the message out about this permaculture world and everything. And I was just like, oh, it's like heartbreaking, like how like there's such like good-hearted hippies that like really like put our hearts into something, and
Yeah.
it's just
I mean,
crazy. I
I
mean,
knew like not to expect too much from the
right?
Discovery Channel,
Yeah,
but like hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. It's like we were saying the other thing too, though. It's like anything that isn't actually creepy, they don't explain. Like if they explained the naked walk through the woods, it would have like lost all its mystique. So it's like they just have to leave it as like, yeah,
So you mentioned your permaculture design course. What happens? What's that all about?
Yeah, so permaculture is kind of this design science that was developed by a couple Australian guys back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's kind of just giving a name and Western packaging to this idea of creating ways of living that can continue indefinitely, that can continue permanently. And yeah, they got inspired by this guy, J. Russell Smith, who actually lived right down the road from here. He lived like 25, 30 minutes away from where we are now. And he wrote this book called Tree Crops, A More Permanent Agriculture. And so then Bill and Dave took that idea and they said, oh, yeah, this is great. We could use this in Australia. basing our food system on tree crops rather than annual grasses that depend on a natural disaster every year to even exist in nature. We can base our agriculture on these long-lived, very steady, very regenerative kind of systems. And then they realize like, oh, well, there's a lot more to our living than just food. We need to think about energy and water. And so they kind of developed it into this whole, oh,
Or sourdough.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
yeah, let me unplug
Another
this.
permaculture thing.
Your sourdough has an alarm to it? Oh, he's in the oven.
Yeah, we don't have a full oven right now, so we're using like a bread maker, which actually
Nice.
from Yoni is like a super quick way to do it.
Cool.
Make it all up, make it super easy.
Yeah,
Nice.
sourdough in a bread machine.
Nice.
But yeah, so like I guess the idea behind permaculture is really just like, how can we live in this modern world in a way that as close as possible mimics and really honors the indigenous wisdom that's existed in every part of the world forever prior to colonization and civilization. And it really emphasizes like being multidisciplinary and really learning a lot about every aspect of our lives so that we can play a more conscious role in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, it's funny how permaculture is so like broad in a sense, but then also like I noticed sometimes at the garden people come with different in Tennessee, people will come with different ideas of permaculture and then like have like just different ideas of like how to put it in practice where like sometimes at the garden it's like we'll just do a really conventional, just like this is a row of eggplant, this is a row of this is a row of that, because it's like easier to just like see it and be like, okay, and then we harvest it and it's like efficiency and all these things, and then people will interpret permaculture as like, let's just mix it all up or let's just plant things randomly all over. And then I'm like, but then I can't find it. And I don't know, it's interesting to see different people's like interpretation of permaculture, and how it applies. And I'm curious, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it seemed like sometimes it was like efficiency versus permaculture. And I don't know if it necessarily has to be that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's like really been one of the big driving factors in what's gotten us to where we are today, is like this emphasis of efficiency of labor in particular.
Mm-hmm.
All the work, all the technology that we've developed in agriculture over the years has been for the sake of eliminating human labor from the process. So back in the day where it was like one farmer feeding, 20 or 30 people, nowadays one farmer is feeding, or growing enough calories for like over 100 people because they're using tractors and, there's all these different fossil fuel inputs and mining inputs. It's all extractive and destructive. And I think because of that, some people get into permaculture and they say, all right, let's go in the total opposite direction, do everything hand scale, completely eliminate tractors from the equation, do everything in this like very mimicking nature. So like you said, integrating everything. That is one of the permaculture principles, is integrate rather than segregate. And so it just can become a little bit chaotic to a point where systems almost become unintelligible to somebody who isn't very experienced with plants and plant identification and things like that. So I think it's all about the balance, I like balance and everything and taking the middle path. And in permaculture, there's also this concept of zones where you have these zones of activity. Zone 0 being the consciousness, the inner reality that you occupy constantly in every waking moment. And then zone 1 being places that you visit daily, like your kitchen, your bathroom, your front porch, your driveway, and the places that you go to on a daily basis. And then zone 2 is places that you'll visit on a weekly basis, and zone 3 is like places that you only visit occasionally. So that would be like where the orchards go and things like that. You might have your row crops in zone 3 because you'll visit them occasionally. You'll have your raised beds and really intensive gardening systems in zone 2, where it's not hard for you to go and check on the eggplants and make sure the potato beetles aren't wiping them out, and intervene where necessary. But as much as possible, we want to design work out of these systems. So we have that same goal of designing labor out of the system, but rather than doing it with mechanization and fossil fuel inputs, we're aiming to do it with symbiotic relationships and incorporating life forms that assist us just by virtue of the way that they live and the traditions that they honor.
Right.
That's a beautiful answer.
Yeah, so try and put your strawberries as close to you as possible in zone 1 so you get them before the bugs, and it's easy to weed because you can see that they're getting out of control.
Yeah,
and you can put little beer traps in there at the end of each night when you're sipping your beer. You save the last sip for the slugs, and then they go into the beer traps instead of onto your strawberries.
Wow, that's amazing. I've been drinking stale, shitty beer all my life. I should just be feeding slugs with it. Oh my jeez. You mentioned like opposed to annuals, you were saying the annuals depend on a natural disaster every year. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, that's a perspective that I got from a good brother right down the road in Middletown over at the Reed Center, Ben Fritton. He would always point that out, that like when you look at rice and corn and wheat and soy, even like a lot of these annual crops that our food system is based around and centered around, like the 3 grasses that I mentioned, corn, wheat, and rice, represent 50% of the world's calorific intake. So 50% of human calories consumed on this planet come from 3 grasses. All 3 of those grasses, rice, where does it live? In the floodplains of rivers, where the soil is constantly getting washed out. And so it's an early successional plant that only lives for 1 year. With corn, it was based around fire. When wildfires would sweep through, the corn would gain an advantage because it produces so many seeds. So it would have lots of seeds in the seed bank. After the fire, everything else is wiped out and the corn can dominate for a year or 2. But after that, its population goes down, down, down. So then we need to recreate the natural disaster in order to get a big field of corn again.
That makes sense. Wow. That's wild. I never thought of it like that. That's cool.
Yeah, and that's what tilling is. Tilling is mimicking a natural disaster. It's basically mimicking a landslide. And what happens after a landslide, especially when the rain comes? All of your topsoil gets washed into the river. All of the nutrients end up feeding anaerobic bacteria and cyanobacteria that deoxygenate the water, increase what's called eutrophication, which is like basically where the nitrogen levels are increasing, the oxygen levels are decreasing, and the water gets totally polluted, and all the life forms that would normally filter the water and clean the water and oxygenate the water end up dead. And so we poison our water and lose soil at the same time using these methods. And so then what's the answer? Dump a bunch of chemical fertilizers on them.
Yeah.
That'll fix it.
Yeah, I just found out that nitrogen is like 2% of the world's CO2 emissions. It's pretty wild. But also your permaculture design course apparently is quite unique in the fact that it's a multi-season course. That's so cool. Like people go there like every weekend throughout the year or something like this.
Yeah, we do it one weekend a month for April, May, and June, and then September, October, November. So they get to see the planting season and they get to see the harvesting season at like a higher level of resolution, because most permaculture design courses are like, take all of this information, like trying to get a sip of water from a fire hose, as my dear friend and teacher Mark Williams always says, and then take that and apply it. And what I see is 95% of the time people take a permaculture design course. By the end of it, they feel exhausted and overwhelmed, and it just sits in the far recesses of their mind for years. And they'll say, "Oh yeah, I got my permaculture design certificate 10 years ago." I'm like, "Oh cool, where's your farm? Where's your garden? Where's your orchard? What are you doing with it?" "Oh, I don't have time. I don't have land. I haven't. And I'm like, that's bullshit. In my courses, you're going to eat food from a permaculture garden. You're going to learn how to process wild foods. You're going to learn how to propagate things, and you're going to take those propagations home and have to nurse your own cuttings and nurse your own root divisions and care for your grafted apple tree and see to it that these things actually live, that you're actually growing trees. By the end of it, you're going to have to find somewhere to plant trees, or you're going to have to live with the guilt of murdering a tree.
Yeah, that's so common. I see like a lot of people that live in cities and stuff and are interested in permaculture, so they'll take like maybe an online course or something like that, and then struggle with like how to put it into practice or like really feel like they're doing it in like a physical way. So that's cool. So do you have recommendations for those people living in cities that want to practice permaculture?
Yeah, get out there and do it. Guerrilla planting is a freaking thing.
Oh yeah.
One of my favorite plant people ever, Andy Ferk, is like all about, he's down in Florida, down in Arcadia, Florida. Absolutely brilliant, amazing gem of a human being. When he was living in Miami, they came up with this program they called Fruition Miami. And the idea was they would gather seeds from all the most vigorous and thriving fruit and nut trees in South Florida. They would nurse them out in recycled little solo cups, like the beer pong cups from like frat parties and stuff. So you just go to any college campus in the US and dig through their dumpsters, and you'll find hundreds of these cups for free. You stack them all up and poke a hot rod through the bottom of them. You can get 30 or 40 of them at once if your rod's long enough. And then, now they've got drainage. You pack them full of soil. You put a fruit tree in there. You nurse it until it's, 12, 18 inches tall. And then they would take these bulb planters that are the same size as the solo cup, and he would pull up to a stoplight and just hop out of his car with his bulb planter, dig a little hole, stuff a fruit tree in there. They did this with over 20,000 fruit trees, and like 8,000 of them are still living. They're huge avocado trees. This is like 30 years ago now, 20 years ago, something like that, when he was living in Miami. But yeah, so people
That's
make
so
up
cool.
the excuse of like, I don't have land, I don't have space to permaculture. Bullshit. Like the earth is your garden.
Hell yeah.
Just plant trees. Make friends. Make some friends. You have friends that want trees in their yard. Give it to them.
Right? It's a hard thing to say no to. It's like, who doesn't want a fruit tree? But it's so crazy how few people actually are doing it. It's like a novelty, or I don't know. At least it feels like that up here.
Well, yeah. And trees, I don't know. Trees just seem like so out of reach. When we think about growing food, we always just think about putting in some lettuce, growing a carrot, growing tomatoes. The idea of a tree just seems like an impossible feat. But in reality, it's actually one of the easiest things to grow, because once you put it down there, you don't have to do much to it,
It's just going.
You protect it for the first 3 years, and it'll protect you for the next 1,000.
And it's beautiful because, like, then lands that have, really abundant matured fruit trees just feel so like Garden of Eden. Like there was this one land we went to in Florida that was just like invaluable land because it had like these like 50-year-old, what's it called? What's the one that takes like egg? that's in
Oh,
Florida.
egg fruit, canistel, yeah.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my
we've
gosh,
had
it had
that
like,
too.
and then there's the one that's like it tastes like chocolate pudding because it's like
Uh-huh.
black spote or something. Yeah. It had like
Yep.
a, I don't know, 50 or 60-year-old black spote that was just like these beautiful little chocolate pudding fruits like all over the ground. And it was like, this is like, it just felt so magical.
Yeah, we've got little babies of both of those that we're gonna take down to Florida. We bring the seeds
Nice.
up and nurse them out here through the
Okay,
growing
cool.
season, and then we take them back down to Florida and we plant them out, and they're a year old. And some of them make it, some of them don't, but it's not much sweat off of our backs to do it. We just have a dozen of them in one little pot, and then that's it. Then you separate them and you planted 24 trees. It's like it's a little something.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. For some, you said it's not so much sweat off your back. For some reason, for me though, like Florida, just I don't know why it seems like a place that isn't worth investing in. But I wonder what your opinion on this is, because I'm like the ocean is rising, right? So like if we're putting a lot of energy into this space that might not even be there in 20 years or some of it, do you have any concerns about that or not?
There goes my mom's Christmas clock. Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're good. It kind of reminds me of like the Buddhist monks who do the sand mandalas, and they put so much care and attention and make these incredible, intricate designs that are all fractalized and like sacred geometry and whatnot, and they're praying the whole time, and they put 3 days or a week into it, and then when it's done, as soon as it's done, they sweep it all off the table and dump the sand in a river nearby. It's like,
Wow.
as much as anything, I think it's just about the heart that we put into it. And like, even if the trees don't survive, because a lot of them don't, like ocean levels rising aside, like winter is not the best time to plant trees in Florida. It doesn't rain. So, a lot of these trees that we plant have not made it, but even still, it's just for the sake of trying, even if one of them makes it, that tree might live 150, 200 years and be producing fruit that whole time. Like that's meaningful. That's
Yeah.
some full bellies, some happy tongues that taste a delicious fruit. And like, I don't know. I think if the ocean level really does rise so fast that Florida gets consumed in our lifetime, I'll be grateful that there are some trees rotting at the bottom of the ocean that I planted, that like
Fuck yeah.
that vibration gets into the ocean, because it's like it's about a prayer as much as anything, and just like putting energy into the earth and like letting it know that we're not forgetting about it and ignoring it and giving up on it, and just like letting apathy and fear dominate our life choices.
Oh yeah, I knew you'd have something beautiful to say about my personal fear mongering on Florida. Yeah, Jesus. Jess, I was stalking your Instagram and I saw you. I was like seeing you sitting on something, and I was like, okay, you guys building a compost toilet? And then I realized it's a Yoni steamer. What is that all about?
Yeah, Yoni herbal steams. They're great for just healing the womb, and they're a really great meditation and just incorporating plants into like daily practices for women. And yeah, Eric helped me build like a little box that I can like take apart and put back together, and so it's like really easy to like take with me on the road, and I can just like put an Instant Pot in it and then like have like the steam going, and I can just do it like in the most natural, just beautiful places. And yeah, I mean it's been a really great practice for me, and just like being able to like incorporate different herbs and like working with them and just getting to know them and creating that relationship and helping it to grow deeper. And then also just like getting to like have those herbs like heal me and like work in my body. And feeling those effects. So.
Yeah, I felt really inspired. I've never done that, but I was like, oh wow, look, they just build a little box and then they just do it. So cool.
Yeah,
And so you're just like putting the herbs in the water and then the steam is coming up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll let that like enter like my yoni. I'll also like put my face down there sometimes
Right,
and
it's
just
just
like breathe it in and yeah, and just really like incorporate it that way.
I think people
Yeah,
used to do that. Oh, sorry.
No, you're okay.
I was just going to say, I think I saw some depictions of this happening in like Russia, where like the old grandmother, probably by accident, would put her big skirt over the pot of food, to keep herself warm. But also, it's maybe acting as a yoni steamer too. That's really cool. Is there any specific herbs?
Very ancient. Yeah, I like to use hibiscus. I'll use cannabis, yarrow, plantain, mint. Yeah, I mean, I've got like a long list of
lemon balm was
lemon
another one,
balm,
and the sweet
bee
Annie.
balm, sweet Annie, yeah. Yeah, there's like mugwort, motherwort. Yeah, and like all of these herbs I've literally just gathered from our garden, like right outside of our door. So they're like super easy to grow and yeah, it's just abundant and yeah, and it's a very like ancient tradition. I mean, it's something that women have been doing for centuries, and I think we just like have become so disconnected that we don't even think about it because we're just like, yeah, like I mean, on top of like all the prescriptions and everything that women are encouraged to take, and like all of that, like disrupting our hormones, like this is like about rebalancing that.
That's beautiful.
Beautiful. Hell yeah. I'm good. I gotta. Do I have to make you one now to be as cool as Eric and be nice? I'm a good partner. Yeah, maybe one. I mean, I heard that it's good for after you have kids. So maybe if we have kids in the future, after that, it's definitely something to look into. And also, what's crazy? I was stalking your Instagrams. We also saw, Jess, that you were with Eric too, with Hilla the Killer at MycoFest. Do you know her?
Yeah, we're like huge fans of her, but I've never actually met her. But we're like, oh my gosh, they met her. We never met her.
Oh, Hilla the Killer. Oh,
but she's Hilla the Earth now.
Guys, okay, I was so confused. I thought when you said that, we were talking about Hannah Katana, and that doesn't make any sense. I thought it was someone who was going to be on our TV show who didn't, and then you saw them. Okay, now this makes.
But you're also a huge fan of Hilla the Killer.
Totally be on your show, like.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if she likes us. We'll see.
I invited her to be. I think the Pat found her on TikTok like a couple years ago and was like, look at this person. Like, oh my. That we like from then on we were always like, come to the garden.
Like, this totally just like light being bliss bubble of just awesomeness. Like so yeah, and I mean she's in New York too.
I know that we always talk about meeting up with her, but we never made it happen. But MycoFest looked really awesome too.
Yeah. And
even it's a beautiful gathering.
You were talking.
Yeah, it's been one of my favorites. It's been one of my favorites for years. I mean, William Padilla Brown, absolutely brilliant human being. He dropped out of high school at 15 because it was interfering with his education, and looked into growing mushrooms and started growing mushrooms like in a closet, and then ran into the issue of there not being enough oxygen, and in order to bring more oxygen in, you have to involve all of these different pumps and filters so that the air that you pump in is clean so you don't get contamination. And then he thought, well, how can I bring more oxygen in here without a bunch of machines? I'll use photosynthetic algae that will suck up all of the carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. So he got into cultivating spirulina. Then he got into really excited about Cordyceps militaris, is a wild form of cordyceps that grows around here. It's an incredible medicine that has amazing functions in the body. It helps the mitochondria because it has adenosine and cordycepin, both of which act just like ATP in the cells. Their energy, the energy that the cells rely on, that the mitochondria produce from NAD and all of that. You can get it directly from this mushroom, and the effects on energy and vitality are incredible. It's got tons of research behind it, but most commercially available stuff is Cordyceps sinensis, which only grows at high elevation in the Himalayas, and like
Yeah.
people in Nepal find these caterpillars that have been infected with the mushroom and it pops out of its head, right? So we have Cordyceps militaris that grows wild here, and it has a
Wow.
lot of
Okay.
the same medicinal benefits, and probably even some medicinal benefits that sinensis does not have. So he wanted to learn how to grow that. He went to Thai YouTube and then copy and pasted Google into Google Translate and watched all of these tutorial videos from Thailand where they cultivate Cordyceps militaris, and he figured out how to grow Cordyceps militaris and popularized it here in the US. And so yeah, Mycosymbiotics
Wow.
is the gathering that he put together, or MycoFest is what they're calling it now. And I've been going since year 3, and I think they just had year 10 this year. So
Wow. There must be so many crazy mushrooms and stuff that people are figuring out how to grow here and stuff. It's like all over. It's like whole.
Yeah, and I mean the
That's awesome.
crazy like just like mushroom people that are there.
Yeah.
Like, they're just like from all over the world like gathering, and they just have so much knowledge, and it's like I have to let it like wash over me because I'm like it's like so much to take in, but I mean it's definitely like the most informational gathering that I've ever been to.
it's the one gathering where it's the only gathering that I can think of off the top of my head that I would actually pay the $250 to attend if one year they're like, oh, hey, we want to bring in other teachers this year. Like, we don't have a spot for you to teach this year. I would happily just pay the $250 or $300 or whatever it is, because I learned so much there. It's like top level mycologists from all over the world come to it.
I help
Yeah,
out
I
in the
think
kids'
it's
tent, so I get it.
oh, nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like it's cool for people that are like, because we've been getting all these people that are like, watch the show and they're like, that seems cool to live on a commune. And then they're following our content and then they're like, okay, what, one, can I go to the garden or, and then I'm like, it's obviously like thousands of people can't go to the garden, but then, also like people want to like pack up their stuff and move to some other intentional community. But there's like, I feel like it's not so much about these like specific places. It's like this whole movement of people that like, if you went to something like MycoFest or like Earth Skills or things like this, all the dots kind of could start just connecting, and you just through like, person to person friendships is like kind of how I feel like the whole like permaculture network works. And so, yeah, I like talking about these different ways that like somebody who has maybe like a job right now could take time off and go to MycoFest, and that could be like a cool starting point of like this world.
Yeah, and Florida Earth Skills or Earth Skills Everywhere is another good one too. Do you volunteer or do you work, like, do you do classes there, or what do you do?
This is actually the first year that I'm not going to be teaching at Florida Earth Skills. They haven't been able to prioritize going transparent with the economics. And like, I know that nobody's making, boatloads of cash or whatever at it, but just like, to me, transparency with economics is so important, because ultimately I feel like capitalism is sort of at the root of so many issues that we're facing, and it's one of the biggest obstacles in creating this new world that so many of us love living in, and opening those doors to more people. Economics is often the biggest barrier. And so when I see these gatherings that charge $250, $300 to get in, they're having 300 people buy tickets. It's like, you're talking $50,000 to $90,000 in the course of a weekend. Why isn't that turning into an education center? Why isn't that turning into year-round living situations and communities where people can immerse themselves in these skills year-round? And
Sorry, it's that dog. Should I go stop?
yeah, the dog agrees. Speak truth to power, pup.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, I've never really been to anything that charges money. Mostly because I lived like a bum for like 8 years. But that's been like my factor with not going to Earth Skills thus far, is because like I don't know if I really like the model of a lot of money to go there, but I guess it creates also this safety barrier that maybe some people are concerned about within gatherings. But so are you going to be there this year or not? You're not going to go?
Nope,
Okay.
we're skipping it. It's
All
going to
right.
be the first year. I've been to every Florida Earth Skills since the beginning. And that's the thing, it started out as this beautiful donation-based gathering put on by Michael Stevens down in Brooker, Florida, a little bit north of Gainesville. And it was just total like rainbow without the drainbows, as Michael likes to say.
Yeah, I've heard a lot
And
of his sayings.
yeah, and so it was like 3 years of that, and then they moved to Little Orange Creek and it got much bigger, and it just seemed to get more and more kind of like expensive, and I want to know what the expenses are so that we can cut them out, so that we can get it back to a level where the gathering is not only sustained but is just as, if not more profitable than it is now on a donation-based system. That is so meaningful to me, that no one's turned away for lack of funds. Because if we only make these experiences accessible to the people with the money, we lose a lot of the people with the most heart and the most willingness to actually implement these things and live this life full tilt 100% of the time, and not just be like a weekend warrior who makes baskets once a year. Like, I don't know, this isn't supposed to be some kind of novelty. This is supposed to be a pathway, at least in my mind. I don't want to go shoulding on anybody, but I think that the real power to these gatherings is that they can kind of show people a pathway out of Babylon and away from this like destructive, consumer driven, capitalistic mentality that so many of us are stuck in, whether we like it or not.
Right on. Yeah, I'm really excited for like at the garden there's a spring gathering and a fall, and usually there's like 120 people there. This year, probably after the show, there might be 300 people who are coming there for the week, and hopefully we can get like a lot of stuff there for people, because it's just a free gathering too, where no one's getting paid but everyone's working for each other. And funny enough, actually, my friend who's been at Florida Earth Skills the whole time too, says that at the garden, at our free gathering, you get fed way better than you do at Florida Earth Skills. So that's one plus for the garden gathering. But we definitely need to have more intentional workshops. I mean, we have some, but it's all about getting the people who know the shit.
I think that's like gathering versus event too. Like gatherings can be participatory and like decentralized. It's just people coming together, and whoever wants to teach whoever something can teach whoever something, or whatever. I like that structure of gatherings versus like, this is an event and I come with an expectation and I want to be taught something and I pay you money and I think the concept of a participatory gathering really represents more like the whole lifestyle and culture that we're trying to create in the first place, which is like participatory community, so I like that about it.
Yeah,
but sometimes people don't understand that.
What's that?
I was just gonna say, like, people will come to the garden gathering and see the people that are organizing the most and be like, well, why didn't you explain this to me? Or just they're so used to kind of like a setup where they pay for something and then they receive something, that they don't understand the concept of like, oh, no one here is in charge and no one here is like required to do anything for you because you came. It's just like a, but it's just like a mindset shift that it clicks for some people, and some people it's harder to understand.
Completely.
Yeah, I know one of my big inspirations, Frank Cook. When I first got into foraging, I was just diving down these like internet rabbit holes of wild edible plants, just trying to find a free meal in the forest. And I came across this guy, Frank Cook, who changed the whole game for me. Really incredible brother, and definitely worth putting some links to a couple of his videos in the show notes or whatever. But he visioned a gathering called the Green Scene Gathering with Ken Krause, and Ken brought that to life after Frank passed away. And there was a few years there before COVID where we would gather, and the central like concept of it is that everybody's a student with things to learn, and everybody is a teacher with things to share. And so rather than having some rigid defined classes and schedules and itinerary for the whole weekend, we would all just gather, everybody bring food to share, bring your own bowl, bring your camping gear. We'll circle up in the morning around breakfast time, and then announce whatever classes. We stand in a big circle. It's usually 50, 60 people, and brilliant minds. I mean, like top level botanists and mycologists, and we'll stand in a big circle, and somebody will say, I want to teach mushroom. I want to do a mushroom walk around 11. And then somebody else will say, oh yeah, cool. I think I'll do a plant walk in the evening. And somebody else will say, yeah, I'm going to weave some baskets over there after circle. So if anybody wants to learn that, and, somebody else will say, I'll teach grafting, and the whole schedule just evolves organically. And people can decide in the moment, like, is this something that I want to do or teach or share?
Oh yeah. Yeah, like every time I want to go grafting, the issue is I just don't have the tools. The only place that I have near me is a Dollar General. How the heck can I graft trees at a Dollar General, Eric? Can you help me out?
Yeah, well, a little shameless self-promotion here. We can put the link to my YouTube in the show notes as
We
well.
will.
And I actually have a video on my YouTube explaining how to graft with nothing but dollar store materials.
What?
I think I spent like $7, and I was able to graft an Asian pear, and last year it produced its first fruits. I grafted it onto an invasive Bradford pear, just like we did at the garden, just like they set up all the boom mics and recorded and made this big show about it, and it never made the cut. Aww. Yeah, let's focus on Naraya putting boogers in people's food instead of how people can transform an invasive problem tree into hundreds and thousands of pounds of fruit per tree per year forever after. Like it's probably more important to talk about boogers in people's food.
It feels like a
Definitely.
Black Mirror episode, or like that movie Don't Look Up, where it's like there's like this crazy important message, and like it's like, and then like it's just like dystopic society is just like gonna make it look like this, and it's like what? Like I don't know, it's crazy, but yeah.
It was sad.
Maybe there'll be some bonus materials someday, because it's true they did film all that grafting and stuff. I forgot about that.
Yeah, they filmed grafting, they filmed tree plantings, and like to me, that's like the most important part. If you look at this like whatever modern civilization, this petrochemical culture that we're all immersed in right now, the biggest single issue, at least in my mind and according to lots of other experts as well, is our food system. It's having almost 1 billion acres in agricultural production, and all the fertilizers, all the tilling, all the mimicked natural disasters, all the shipping, all the packaging, all the meat, the way that meat is raised, like, 2/3 of that billion acres is just pasture land for animals. And then a lot of those animals end up finishing their life in feedlots, just getting pumped full of GMO corn in like awful, horrendous conditions. And so, yeah, if we can fix our food system, then 90% of the battle is won. And especially if, like, right now, there's so few farmers in the United States, it's not even on the census. If you look at like US census questionnaires under occupation, there's so few farmers, they don't even have a little bubble for farmer. It's like been such an important role in communities for tens of thousands of years since farming really started. And prior to that, everybody was involved in the food system. In hunter-gatherer life, everybody is involved in gathering the things and processing the things and cooking the things, and everybody plays a certain role. And now, since it's all machines doing all the work, 50% of the world's petroleum consumption is tied up in our food system, and it occupies 1 billion acres. There's also 40 million acres of lawn space that, grassland in front of people's cookie cutter ticky tack houses. They've got grass, 40 million acres of it. In that 40 million acres, with tree crops and perennial vegetables and small vegetable patches of high intensity annual agriculture, we could easily feed everybody in the United States and completely eliminate the need for an industrial food system and completely liberate 1 billion acres of land for restoration projects and polycultural orchards and forest gardens that center around native habitat and wildlife habitat and river health and stream health and all that sort of thing. And it would take no time. I mean, we saw it with COVID at the beginning of COVID, when all the factories shut down in like China and India and stuff. And the scientists were like, oh my God, we can't believe it. The rivers are clean. The air is clean. We thought this was going to take decades to achieve with active remediation project. No, if we just get the fuck out of the way, nature will take care of the rest. Like, and if we actively tie into the remediation and identify these big problems and address them systematically and collectively, then we could clean up the world in no time. We don't have to worry about Florida going underwater, because in 2 to 3 years we could sequester all of the carbon since the Industrial Revolution 150 years ago. All the carbon that's been put into the atmosphere could be back in the soil in a matter of years. That's just increasing organic matter by like 1%, I think, in arable soil. That's not even to say anything of the steps that we can take towards reversing desertification and, actively planting out giant forests and stuff like that. Like, we could do so much. And really, the biggest enemy is just capitalism. Good old capitalism.
Maisie, the dog agrees with this one again.
Yeah, see, anytime I mention capitalism, the dog's like, fuck that
shit. Yeah, she's a raccoon hunter as a dog, so maybe that's why. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, yeah, it's crazy. Like you mentioned that, like, all these, there's hardly any farmers anymore, and we're really losing touch with the relationship that we've had with our food source for so long, and that leads to us, if we don't have a connection with it, then it leads to exploitation, and it leads to eating toxic food. I know that you've mentioned before, one toxic food that you can find in a supermarket is a white button mushroom. Can you tell me about that?
You want to cover that one?
With the white button, you know the science behind it.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, you know, those little
Raw.
white button mushrooms that they try to serve us raw. It's like the number one mushroom that's consumed raw. You see it in like salads and stuff like that. That goes back to capitalism once again. North American mushroom growers were unable to compete with the Chinese for these. They would grow the button mushrooms, cook them, can them up, and ship them over. And that's how most people consumed their mushrooms, in the, I would say, probably 30s to 70s or 80s. And then in the 80s, North American mushroom growers made this push for raw mushrooms because the raw mushrooms wouldn't last long enough to be shipped over from China, where they have the mushroom cultivation so refined and the cost of living is so much lower. They weren't able to compete. So by introducing a raw mushroom market, they were able to increase North American production and relocalize the mushroom cultivation to a certain extent, which I totally agree with. But the problem is the white button mushrooms have a garetine in them, which is linked to like colon cancer, and it has all kinds of issues with it. You know, it's an inflammatory compound that is potentially carcinogenic according to the research. So if you cook your mushrooms, if you cook the little white button mushrooms, 95% of that is volatilized and goes up in the air, and it's not a big deal. But if you eat them raw, then it becomes a problem. With like morel mushrooms, for example, if you eat them raw, they have hydrazines in them that are, it's similar chemically to like rocket fuel. And so if you eat those raw, they'll get you very sick. I hear that the biggest case of mushroom poisoning in the US was some like raw vegan event in like San Francisco or something. I probably have the details all screwed up, but some foofy chef made this raw morel mushroom pate and served a tiny little dollop of it to like 300 people and got them all sick in one event because he didn't know about the hydrazines in them that need to be cooked out.
Wow.
The only mushroom that you can eat raw is the beefsteak, and
Yeah, the beefsteak polypore, Fistulina hepatica is a very low chitin mushroom. There are a few others like Tremula, Exidia, different jelly fungi that have low chitin and are safe to be eaten raw. But even those, I prefer to cook them because they're highly favored foods by slugs, and then the slugs carry parasites and pathogens on them. So if a slug wiped its little slithery slime over your mushroom and then you eat it raw, you can get parasites from that can be very tough to deal with. So it's much easier to just go ahead and cook all of your mushrooms at least a little bit.
Okay, yeah, okay, and or dry them out because in my third time in my lifespan, I may or may not have had some special mushrooms raw. So I'm sure once in a blue moon, it's fine. But
even those mushrooms, if you make them into a tea with some lemon juice and a little bit of passion flower, which has monoamine oxidase inhibitor, it will amplify the absorbability and the functionality of those mushrooms.
beautiful.
Wow. So yeah, so there's almost none that you really even should eat raw. Okay, that's good to know. I had no idea.
When have you ever had raw mushrooms?
Sometimes they slice them like that. If you get
in a
like
salad.
some weird salad.
I used to put the white button mushrooms in a sandwich all the time. So
they taste good. They have a nice crunch to them and everything. Like the beefsteak polypore tastes really good. It's got malic acid in it, and that acid gives it like a sour taste. So it tastes like lemony when it's raw. It's really tasty.
Damn. It's so cool how I was also in how much you guys. I saw this like ginormous maitake mushroom on one of your Instagrams. Is that forage?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's insane.
yeah, we got probably like over 100 pounds this year.
Oh, we
That's
got way more
crazy.
than 100. Our best day was probably just over 100 pounds. So we
Wow.
probably got like 300. We didn't have a lot of really good days this year for mushroom hunting. We were more focused on the nuts. We've been getting nuts with nuts. So like chestnuts, the mighty chestnut, like nuts are the food of the future. They're the food of the past and they're also the food of the future. This nut right here, the chestnut, this is a Chinese chestnut. The American chestnuts more or less are functionally extinct because of a blight that got introduced in the early 1900s called Cryphonectria parasitica. But the macronutrient profile of a chestnut is somewhere in between like corn and rice. So it's very carbohydrate rich. Anything that you can use cornmeal for, you can use chestnut flour for. So this is like an incredible superfood carbohydrate with lots of amazing minerals, very easy to grow. The highest yielding Chinese chestnut on record produced 1,100 pounds in one season. That's over 1
Wow.
million calories in
Wow.
one season from one tree. 1 million calories. See, I am kind of like a fat kid at heart. I've just always had a ravenous appetite. My mom literally had me tested for worms when I was a kid because I would eat 3 times as much as any of my brothers and sisters and never gain any weight. And yeah, food has dominated a lot of my thoughts for many, many years. Like, and so I'm always curious about how do we feed the family? Like, how do we step out of this capitalistic, destructive society and feed the family in a regenerative way? You got one in your hand right there. Like,
The bitter nut.
sorry to just like dive right into showing
No,
off my
please,
nuts
yeah.
with no warning.
This is
I didn't
great.
even
No,
ask for
about the
consent
nuts.
before showing you my nuts.
we've been waiting an hour for it. We edged for an hour.
So this is the bitter nut. This is one that is kind of considered a junk tree by a lot of foresters because wildlife doesn't particularly favor it. And here you can see it still in the husk. So this is a type of hickory nut. They call it the bitter nut hickory or the yellow bud hickory, Caryocortiformis. And it's the most incredible oil that you can possibly taste. Like, I've never tasted a better oil. This is a half gallon of the bitter nut oil. So this represents about 3.5, 4 gallons of nuts that we gathered and pressed with a commercial oil press. And you know, like these things are never going to be economically viable in the current model that we're operating under, but
Right.
they are so deeply satisfying to the soul. And the nutrition that they offer is beyond anything that you can get at a grocery store. This would be like the highest quality imported olive oil from like Spain or Tunisia or something in terms of its lipid profile and nutritional qualities. And we don't even know about the polyphenols and the different compounds that are in it. We're going to get some testing done this year, but it's a great example. This bitter nut hickory is a great example of how important it is for us to build community around these things, because in order to press that oil efficiently, we had to use a machine that costs at least $7,000. And one of our good friends in the area, Neil Gormley, made that investment and went ahead and acquired this incredible machine that is being kept over at the Reed Center in a big, beautiful barn. And they took care of wiring it all up to run on 220 volts with a European outlet plug. They had to order a special plug that's like, because the machine comes from Germany. And we didn't think like, hey, can you guys put an American 220 plug? So they had to order a special plug outlet like from the UK or something so that we would even be able to plug the thing in. It was like a lot of resource and energy put into acquiring this machine. And Neil is such a sweetie pie. He's just like, I want this to be a resource for the community. Nobody has to pay me anything if they don't want to, if it's outside of their means and they want to just come and press bitternut hickory oil. I just want us to have a local oil supply that people can be a direct part of. And so that's really beautiful. The Nutty Buddy Collective down in Asheville. Shout out to Bill Whipple and all those folks down there doing great work in the Asheville area. There's one, so the name of the machine is a Kerncraft, and there's one in upstate New York that Andy knows. He knows the people who got that one. I'm forgetting their names right now. But there's one in upstate New York. Sam Thayer has one in the Great Lakes area. I think he's based in Michigan. Sam Thayer is another incredible forager. Highly recommend people look into his stuff. He's got a great TikTok too that's been blowing up with wild edible stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of work to do. And like nuts like this. This is the largest nut in North America. People didn't know I have the largest nuts in North America, but they're right here in my hand. This is the Hikon. This is a McAllister Hikon. So this is a named variety that was intentionally bred.
Like that's the bitter nut.
Oh yeah, do we have like a quarter or something? Or I don't know. Here's a yerba mate can for comparison. It's like half the size of your average soda can. And this is a cross between a pecan. So here's your average. Here's like an average pecan. And well, this is actually a super large pecan. This is the Jay's Giant Pecan. And then here's the Hikon, the McAllister Hikon. So the largest pecan that we've ever weighed out was 14 grams in the shell. And the largest McAllister Hikon that we ever weighed out was 45 grams in the shell and had 14 grams of meat in it. And that meat takes pecan with less bitterness and more of a maple syrup note to it. It's really incredible. The shellbark hickory that is the other parent to this plant is also amazing. What else? There's one more bag of nuts that you guys should see for sure. This is like a little bag of hazelnuts. Hazelnuts, I think, are the most appropriate. They're the most appropriate crop for a very rapid transition away from factory farmed monocrop agriculture into a tree-based annual culture agriculture, because hazelnuts can start producing in as little as 3 years. They reach commercial viability in 8 years. This is according to research from Oregon State University looking at commercial hazelnut orchards in the Willamette Valley. So commercial viability, meaning that it's economically profitable to start harvesting at year 8. They break even at year 12. And beyond that, they start averaging around $1,000 per acre per year. And they're very reliable producers that can produce anywhere from 1,500 to 4,000 pounds per acre per year. So 4,000 pounds per acre per year is definitely the most that we can get from any tree crops that I've researched. And when you look at corn, it can generate 8 to 10,000 per acre in a really good year. And so the hazelnut, though, is like closer to 3,000 calories per pound, where corn is more like 1,450, 1,500 calories per pound. So on a calories per acre basis, hazelnut is competitive with the most productive crop in the world, which is corn. So like that's a very important, I think, transitional species. Not that we want to just cover the world in hazelnut orchards, but it's certainly an incredible superfood. hazelnuts have more polyphenols per pound than blueberries do. They've got more omega-9 oleic acid fats than olive oil does. And very easy to cultivate, very meaty, very satisfying. You know, that high fat kind of food, it just really satisfies us. And there was a time after the last ice age when hazelnuts represented as much as 80% of Northern European diets. So there's a deep, you know, especially for all the people of European descent, there's a deep, like, ancestral connection to this tree.
Yeah.
And that was maybe like, were they processing them, or were they just like cracking them and eating them, you think? I wonder.
I imagine they were doing some kind of processing. It seems pretty likely that there was some amount of processing, maybe boiling them or something. They are kind of high in oxalates as far as nuts go, and oxalates they bind to calcium in the body. So I would imagine consuming them in such large amounts, they were probably doing some kind of a boiling them and then mashing them up into like a porridge kind of thing so that they would get rid of the oxalates in their processing.
Yeah.
That just seems like the easiest thing to me. If you've got a whole buttload of hickory nuts, you just crack them all up, boil them, strain out the water, and then mash them into a kind of like softened nut butter gruel kind of vibe. Like
I get really excited about flour and oil, because that's two things that I've never lived anywhere that was able to produce its own of that. And I've heard, I know our friend has a bunch of chestnut trees and he made chestnut flour, but he was like a little discouraged by like the labor it took to get like a bag of flour or something. But I don't know what kind of systems he has to process chestnuts.
And right here where we have like 10 acres of acorns. But I've seen people make a flour out of that, but I don't know if it's that good.
Yeah, acorn flour is great. That's another one that's like 2,000 to 2,500 calories per pound. So if you think of it this way, 2,500 calories per pound, every pound of acorns that you gather is enough calories to keep you alive for another day. And in one afternoon, I mean, it wasn't even, what was it, like 15 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that? Yeah, 30 minutes, it was 15 minutes for each of us. We went to this one tree and there was just a buttload of nuts all right there on the ground on the edge of the sidewalk. And so we just took buckets and scooped them up. We got like 50 pounds in 15 minutes, 30 minutes between the two of us. So 50 pounds, that's like 2 months of food for one person.
Yeah.
That would be enough food to keep both of us alive for a month. Can you imagine a work relaxation schedule where you spend 30 minutes a month working and then the rest of the month just chilling out, processing your acorns into flour? And
yeah, I like it also as like, the thought that kind of like what you were saying before is like just the foraging and the planting in a permaculture fashion and things like this is like symbiotic with like that just being a lifestyle too, of like, when you're foraging, you're taking a walk outside and not seeing it like, I don't know, so much as work hours as like just what you're doing and putting that love into what you're eating every day, and just like a total mindset of not just like I have to do this labor so that way I can eat, as more of like, just a natural flow throughout your day of like preparing your food in like a thoughtful way.
And the more that we get people on board with this stuff, the more that innovations are going to happen to make it easier, to make it more accessible. Like your friend with the chestnut flour, I don't know what method they were using, but I use just a world's best nutcracker, they call it, the Dave built, and you can crack probably 20 pounds an hour or more, like a 5-gallon bucket in an hour or two. And then we dehydrate them and they come free from their shells very easily after they've been dehydrated. And then we just grind them up. Then we take them, bag them up, or jar them up, whatever the case may be. And then we take a handful at a time and grind it into flour in a little coffee grinder and make a batch of pancakes. Or like we have a Vitamix with a stainless steel pitcher. Don't use the plastic Vitamix pitcher. You'll break it. Ask me how I know. But if you get the stainless steel Vitamix pitcher, you can grind the dried chestnuts into flour very easily, and then you've just got a little jar of flour that's ready to go for the next couple weeks and make pancakes and mix it into bread. It doesn't have any gluten, so it doesn't really like rise like wheat bread does. But I imagine, innovation could happen in that regard too. And like we could figure out ways to take it from a hand crank situation to a bicycle crank situation. And then instead of using your elbows and your wrists to drive this difficult kind of process, you can use your quads and your hamstrings and your glutes, like the biggest muscles in your body, and use gear ratios to give you even more momentum and like a flywheel that gives you a bit of a cushion that makes it possible to crack and mill and do so many other operations with bicycle power.
Yeah, we have a friend who is part of the radical fairy community who designed a bicycle nutcracker, and they were like showing it off at universities and going on tour with it and stuff like this. But you bring up something quite interesting, which is like we still have remnants in today of our connection with nuts, and specifically the nutcracker. Here around Christmas, we use nutcrackers as a decorative piece, but in truth, like this time of the year, we had a deep connection with nuts and the nutcracker. And I don't know if nutcrackers are really meant to crack nuts. I mean, they look a little weak, but yeah, we still have them here today.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely much better designs on nutcrackers than the decorational little. And why does it have to be a soldier? It's supposed to be the holiday season. It's supposed to be all about love, and we've got a soldier cracking our nuts for us. That's weird. There's some really weird stuff that creeps into our culture that's just like, it's all centers around war and domination, freaky stuff. It's so weird that people aren't more freaked out by that kind of stuff. Instead, they're freaked out by like chayote. Oh my God, you eat that thing? What is that?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is the oldest cultivated vegetable in the Americas. This is a Central American perennial squash that, it doesn't really... It does perennialize here in Frederick, Maryland, and I've gotten it to perennialize outdoors in Southern Maryland. But even as an annual, we grew one plant this year in the greenhouse and got close to 200 pounds. I think we got around 190 pounds of this super high quality, low carbohydrate, mineral rich vegetable that every part of the plant is edible. You can steam the tips like asparagus. You can dry and powder the leaves and use it for tea or green powder. You can harvest the root and cook that like a sweet potato. And obviously you can eat the amazing squash. But like down in Tennessee at the garden, this would probably perennialize and grow for 3 to 5 years. You plant it once and it'll grow for 3 to 5 years, producing hundreds of pounds a year. It's just insane.
All right.
I love that kind of stuff. I like stuff that's easy to grow, highly productive, very tasty, and like, easy to feed the family with. That's the direction we're trying to go. Well, that's the thing. The only thing about chayote is that if you want to preserve it, you have to put it in a crate somewhere in your house. It's really intensive. So you harvest it in this big old crate with like 40 or 50 pounds in a crate, and then you have to find a quiet corner where it won't be disturbed for it to last like a year.
Which can be difficult in like 300 square feet.
Yeah, we're in 300 square feet, so we had to build all kinds of shelves for the food storage. But No, but really,
That's
realistically,
amazing.
like anybody who's got a root cellar or a
Yeah.
basement or, a closet that could be dedicated to food storage, sweet potatoes and chayote both
Mm-hmm.
can keep for up to a year at room temperature.
I mean, even our garlic has done that.
Yeah, garlic, onions, there's so many crops like that. And like this chayote, this is what happens when it's like going bad. This is when it's shifting from being just a fruit back into being a plant again. And so what we'll do is take this and cut it long ways, like around the whole seed. And then we grab it from here and pry this open, and it cracks open. And then we can extract the seed and we'll still eat the fruit. So it doesn't really go bad. It just turns into another plant and you have to eat it. But we've had them. Yeah, yeah. We've definitely had them keep for over a year before here, just like in a walk-in here at Plant Path. So they can last a very long time. And this is another one. This is a sweet treat right here.
Woo.
This is a persimmon. This is one of the Asian varieties, Ichikijiro. And like I know a lot of people in the permaculture world are like all natives, and well, it varies. You've got people who are all into native stuff and other people who are more flexible. And I think, there's lots of great genetics from all over the world. And I think it's wise for us to, at least in the areas that are well managed and intended to continue being managed, so that some of these more dispersive and spreading kind of plants, like invasive plants, can be kept in check and be harvested and be consumed. I think it's fine to plant out, different exotic species, like Zhaogulan, for example, is an amazing herb from Asia that has the same chemistry as ginseng, which ginseng is horribly overharvested. So this vine is kind of, it could become invasive if it was left unchecked. It spreads and it can like swallow big sections of the edge of woods and things like that. But I think it's worth cultivating for people who want to consume the ginseng kind of medicine. They should be growing Zhaogulan in a little pot, somewhere that they can control it and contain it and get their medicine from the Zhaogulan, rather than this slow growing native plant that you have to harvest the root to get the medicine. Grow this super fast, like abundant vine that you can harvest the leaf from and get the same medicine. I think it's worth it. I don't think this is a time for being a purist, This is a time for like the middle path.
Using what's available to us and what makes the most sense and stuff. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what's going to be easy and attractive and get as on board as possible, because like my motto is each one teach 10, because if each one of us can get 10 people into this lifestyle every year, or like for you it's 10,000, I want y'all to get like 10,000 people a year at least.
Wow.
But yeah, if each one of us can just teach 10, though, 10 is a very achievable number. I think most people have 10 friends. And if you don't, you need to get out there and make 10 friends and get them as excited about permaculture and wild edibles and mushrooms and habitat remediation. Because if each one can get 10 people, and each of those 10 get 10, and each of those 10 get 10, and we keep paying it forward like that, in a decade, we'll take over the world. 10 to the 10th power is 10 billion. So in one decade, we can take over the world. Plant people that care about the earth can be the dominant culture on the planet. And I think that would transform a lot,
That'll be right in time, I think. So stick to that schedule. We can do it.
On the edge.
It's like a pyramid scheme without money.
We might be at the tail end here, guys, but I'm curious, what is your favorite wild edible greens? If you have a particular...
Stinging nettle is great. Yeah. Is that the one?
That's definitely my favorite. Stinging nettle, top tier, top ranking. Yeah. There are native species of it. grows like a freaking weed. It makes an incredible pesto. It makes an incredible tea.
We added it to our sourdough bread that we just baked.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's see.
It like turned the whole loaf green.
Whoa.
Oh, this one isn't so green, but that's the sourdough.
No,
It's green.
yeah,
It's
there you
there's a
go.
little green. Little notes of green.
Nice. Yeah, you mailed
But,
us some to Missouri, I remember.
Yeah, for
That
the
was so exciting.
on the TV show.
That's right.
It
Yeah.
actually was one of the first things we planted onto the TV show land was the nettle that you sent us.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that one, like, we've got it all over the site here at Plant Path, and you can begin harvesting in late March to early April and continue harvesting throughout the entire growing season. We can still go out and harvest some right now into December. There'll be some growing in the greenhouse into mid-January. So you've got harvest from late March to mid-January. It's one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Dry weight, it's like 41% protein. The roots have been found to be active against prostate cancer and breast cancer, which are the two biggest killer cancers. So it's like, yeah, definitely nettles, #1 champion.
Oh yeah, it's one of the only things I'm happy that the Romans did. I think they're the ones who actually spread it throughout Europe. That's now led it to be also in the US. So cool, guys. How can people, unless you have anything else to say, but if not, how can people find you guys online?
I'm Eric Joseph Lewis on all the things. I keep it real simple. I figure the CIA already knows what I had for breakfast, so there's no point in trying to hide. Like, I just make it easy. Eric Joseph Lewis on Gmail, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Cash App, Venmo.
Hey, you also have, it's also a very sophisticated name, like before we met you, it was like Eric Joseph Lewis, it's like you feel like you'd be wearing a top hat, but instead it's a load of dreads, so it's a cool like mix up. Anyway.
It might happen that way when we change our last name to Lotus.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. You guys are really going to do that? Eric Joseph Lotus.
Yeah.
That's
like,
beautiful.
we figured, why do the like patriarchy thing where she takes my last name, and why just like reverse the patriarchy thing and like me take her last name? Let's like choose our own name. And we happen to be at a gathering with a bunch of our friends harvesting the Native American lotus, and we said, what about Lotus? That works really well.
That's
Jess
beautiful.
Lee Lotus and Eric Joseph Lotus. Like,
wow, that is amazing.
Okay, that is beautiful, huh?
There's such a ring to it. All right, cool.
And Jess, how can people find you? If you want people to find you.
Like my Instagram is, I'm like usually active on that. Jess_being. Or I mean, contact Eric. He's a lot more active than I am, and be like, "Hey, I'm trying to reach Jess." Like,
yeah, she like deletes her social media apps for like weeks and months at a time. Like,
good on ya.
If you don't hear back from Jess, it's just because she doesn't love the social media so much.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm hoping. Hopefully, I'll see you in Florida or something like this in the next few months.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, and also just to put a shout out for the nursery, Plant Path Nursery. You can find us online, www.plantpath.org. And that's another great spot to see like more of the intensives. We're going to do a permaculture design course, and we're going to do a foraging course as well that meets up one day a month through the entire growing season so that people can learn how to forage, in a real way. I
really love that model.
Yeah,
that's so
definitely
cool.
Looking forward. Heck yeah. Yeah, and Leela. This is Leela Lotus.
Yeah, I just saw the photo. The photos that you had. You have a photo of me and her together. That's so cute. Oh, him.
She loved you guys. Just being at the garden.
That's good.
Being able to run free. So.
Well, heck yeah, we'll see you in Florida, if not sooner. I'm not sure when y'all are heading down there, but you've definitely got a spot to stop in Maryland, and we've
Hell
got
yeah.
a comfy futon with your name written all
Well,
over
we've
it.
also got the bell tent.
Yeah, we got bell tent and little
Nice.
trailer, and there's lots of options.
Oh, thanks, guys. Yeah, that is on the way down for us in Florida, and we've never really went that route too, around the coast. That's beautiful. In Washington, I've never been to
yeah.
Washington. What is it? What's it all about? I have no idea. So that's exciting.
I
mean
don't know. Let's
DC?
go. Let's go
Oh, is
be
that
on
DC?
Abraham Lincoln's feet. Yeah, DC.
Yeah, let's do that together.
Dude, yes, you know I want to be the pea guy, so that would be amazing. I'll have like a little biochar set up right there, you know what I mean? Fucking hell. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks
love
so
you
much
guys.
for
Thanks
chatting with
yeah,
us.
thanks for coming on.
So you'll be right at home.
Oh my God, like in between his legs? Sitting that. That's my squatter. Oh my gosh.